on the English poets. This is the focus for the coming few lectures. Read the following. But Hector, seeing brave Dash withdraw, struck by the blade, made his way to him through the ranks and drove at him with his spear, piercing the lower belly and ramming the point home. Dash fell with a thud to the grievous sorrow of the Achaean army, as a lion in the high mountains may fight with a tireless wild boar over a trickling stream from which both seek to drink, and conquers his panting enemy by strength alone, so Hector, Priam's son, overcame the valiant son of Menoetius, who himself had killed so many men, and striking him close at hand with his spear, robbed him of his life. Then straddling him, he shouted in victory, I think you boasted you would sack our city. Dash, take our women captive, sail with them to your native land. How foolish! Hector and his swift horses are here to fight for them. Hector, the finest spearman among the warlike Trojans. I who shield them from the day of doom, while as for you, the vultures shall have you. And your choices are fill in the blank. You have to write the name. A. Agamemnon, B. Priam, C. Achilles, D. Patroclus. Next one, read the following passage. In the choice of subject matter, which is limited to experiences of common life in the country, there people use a simple language and directly express deep feeling. Their habit of speaking comes from associating feelings with the permanent forms of nature, such as mountains, rivers, and clouds. The challenge for the poet is to make these ordinary experiences interesting to readers. In other words, the poems attempt to take ordinary subjects and treat them in extraordinary ways. Doing so would cause readers to recognize fundamental truth of universal human experience. Famous lines, which is the work. You have to identify the work here. A. Preface to the lyrical ballads. B. Biographia Literaria. C. A vindication of the rights of women. D. Eminent Victorians. Which is the work here? The passage heralds, this is your third question, the following literary periods, especially in England. A. Classicism, B. Victorian, C. Augustan, D. Romanticism. Next one, read the following. That praises are without reason lavished on the dead, and that the honours due only to excellence are paid to antiquity, is a complaint likely to be always continued by those who, being able to add nothing to truth, hope for eminence from the heresies of paradox, or those who, being forced by disappointment upon consolatory expedients, are willing to hope from posterity what the present age refuses, and flatter themselves that the regard which is yet denied by envy will be at last bestowed by time. Antiquity, like every other quality that attracts the notice of mankind, has undoubtedly votaries that reverence it, not from reason but from prejudice. Some seem to admire indiscriminately whatever has been long preserved, without considering that time has sometimes cooperated with chance. All perhaps are more willing to honor past than present excellence, and the mind contemplates genius through the shades of age as the eye surveys the sun through artificial opacity. Please go through the passage carefully. International exam favorite writer and the work also. So, your questions number 4, who is being referred to? I am not asking you the author's name, I am asking you who is the subject here. A. John Keats, B. Ben Jonson, C. Shakespeare, D. Lord Byron. And next question, what does antiquity mean here in this particular context? I am not asking you to give me the general meaning or notion of antiquity. What does it mean here? A, the Renaissance period, B, the Greek civilization, C, the Roman civilization, D, the ancient past. Next question. Answer the following, again based on the same passage. And the mind contemplates genius through the shades of age, as the eye surveys the sun through artificial opacity. What literary device is being employed here? A, metaphor, B, hyperbole, C, bombast, D, simile. Next one. Read the following. Deep in the shady sadness of a vale, far sunken from the healthy breath of morn, far from the fiery noon and eve's one star, sat grey-haired Saturn, quiet as a stone, still as the silence round about his lyre. Forest on forest hung about his head, like cloud on cloud. No stir of air was there, not so much life as on a summer's day. Robs not one light seed from the feathered grass, but where the dead leaf fell, there did it rest. A stream went voiceless by, still deadened more, by reason of his fallen divinity spreading a shade. The Naiads made her reeds, pressed her cold finger closer to her lips. Your questions. Choose the correct answer. Which work is it? A, Endymion, B, Hyperion, C, Ode to the West Wind, D, Ode to Autumn. So now you know the poet. Who is the poet here? Next one. In the same poem, Naiad refers to A, a water nymph, B, a beautiful youth, C, the war goddess, D, the goddess of love. Next one. Who is the subject of the following lamentation? Grief made the young spring wild, and she threw down her kindling buds as if she autumn were, or the dead leaves, since her delight is flown. For whom should she have waked the sullen year? To Phoebus was not Hyacinth so dear, nor to himself Narcissus, as to both thou Adone, when they stand and sear amid the faint companions of their youth, with dew all turned to tears, odor to sighing Ruth. So questions, choose the correct response. Who is the subject here? I am not asking you the poet. Who is the subject? Who was the poem written for? A, Shelley, B, Byron, C, Blake, D, Keats. Number 10, choose the correct response. Narcissus was a youth known for his A, beauty, B, intellect, C, strength, D, disability. Likewise, you can expect questions on references to Saturn or Phoebus or Echo. So, those are the kinds of characters from Greek mythology, not just the major deities, but also major mythological figures. Next one. Same, based on the same poem, what is the genre of the poem? A, ode, B, elegy, C, ballad, D, lyric. Next one, based on the same poem. 12th, choose the correct answer. Grief made the young spring wild is an example of, it is taken from the same poem or same extract. It is an example of metaphor, simile, personification, onomatopoeia. You should know these definitions or devices very well. Grief made the young spring wild is an example of A, metaphor, B, simile, C, personification, D, onomatopoeia. Question 13, choose the correct response. P.B. Shelley's dash, that was written in 1819, was a reaction of furious outrage at the Peterloo massacre, a distinctly political poem. It praises the non-violence of the Manchester protesters when faced with the aggression of the state. A, Prometheus Unbound, B, Aleister, C, The Mask of Anarchy, D, The Eve of Saint Agnes. Which poem is highly political in nature? Question 14. In August 1802, Samuel Taylor Coleridge set out from his home at Greater Hall, Keswick, for a week's solo walking tour in the nearby Dash Mountains. He kept detailed notes of the landscape around him, drawing rough sketches and maps. These notes and sketches are in notebook number 2, one of 64 notebooks Coleridge kept between 1794 and his death. This event is known as A. Walking tour on the heath, B. Walking tour of the moors in York, C. A walking tour of the Lake District, D. A walking tour in Cumbria. Next one, number 15. Read the following. For what can give a finer example of that frankness and manly self-confidence which our great public schools, and none of them so much as Eton, are supposed to inspire, of that buoyant ease in holding up one's head, speaking out what is in one's mind, and flinging off all sheepishness and awkwardness, than to see an Eton assistant master offering in fact himself as evidence that to combine boarding house keeping with teaching is a good thing, and his brother as evidence that to train and raise little boys for competitive examinations is a good thing. Note that the entire passage is written in one single sentence. Not all of us can write this, so do not attempt this. This is one of the finest examples of written English language. However, this is not for all. This is one of the most elegant passages, but it is beyond the reach of the ordinary writers. So, this is not something that should be attempted. The question is, choose the correct response, identify the work. A. The function of criticism, B. Culture and anarchy, C. Culture and society, D. 7 pillars of wisdom. Next one, read the following. The poem begins as the painter and monk, also the poem's narrator, is caught by some authority figures while roving his town's red light district. As he begins, he is being physically accosted by one of the police. He accuses them of being overzealous and that he need not be punished. It is not until he name drops Cosimo of the Medici from the ruling family of Florence as a nearby friend that he is released. He then addresses himself specifically to the band's leader, identifying himself as the famous painter and then suggesting that they are all, himself included, too quick to bow down to what authority figures suggest. Choose the correct response. Question 16. A. Fra Lippo Lippi, B. The bishop orders his tomb, C. Andrea del Sarto, D. Sordello. One single great British poet, but who is he? Number 17. The following lines are by: for mercy has a human heart, pity a human face, and love the human form divine. Who wrote it? A. Shakespeare, B. Shelley, C. Wordsworth, D. Blake. Next one. The term ominous res refers to A. royalty, B. an old man, C. an eminent scholar, D. a loyal confidant of any powerful individual. Eminence grace, something it has almost become a cliche in the English language. Today it is referred to for several things, but what is the origin and what is the exact meaning? Next one. Choose the correct answer. The Barber of the Seville is a work by A. de Beaumarchais, B. John Gay, C. Oliver Goldsmith, D. Richard Sheridan. Number 19. Choose the correct response. The slogan "No taxation without representation" is associated with A. the Gordon riots, B. the Russian Revolution, C. the Boston Tea Party, D. the fall of the Bastille. Identify the poem. Higher and higher every day till over the mass at noon, the wedding guest here beat his breast, for he heard the loud bassoon. The bride hath paced into the hall, red as a rose is she, nodding their heads before her goes the merry minstrelsy. And choose the correct response. Which work is it? A. Christabel, B. the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, C. Dejection and Ode, D. Frost at Midnight. Which poem do these lines appear in? It's a part from a poem. So was it when my life began, so is it now I am a man. So be it when I shall grow old, or let me die. The child is father of the man. I could wish my days to be bound each to each by natural piety, written in 1802. Which poem are these lines from? Choose the correct response. A. Ode on the intimations of immortality. B. Solitary Reaper. C. My heart leaps up. D. I wandered lonely as a cloud. 22. Identify the poem. The poem begins in the poet's boyhood and continues to 1798. By the latter date, he felt that his formative years had passed, that his poetic powers were mature, and that he was ready to begin constructing the huge parent work. Alternating with his almost religious conviction, there is an unremitting strain of dark doubt through the poem. The poem itself therefore may be considered an attempt to stall for time before going on to what the poet imagined would be far more difficult composition. As he tells the reader repeatedly, his purpose was threefold: to provide a re-examination of his qualifications, to honor Coleridge, and to create an introduction to the recluse. Choose the correct response. A. Ode on the intimations of immortality. B. The excursion. C. The prelude. D. I wandered lonely as a cloud. Which poem is this is being talked about? And the next question. So, read the following excerpt from a poem. O thou in Hellas deemed of heavenly birth, muse formed or fabled at the minstrel's will, since shamed full oft by later lyres on earth, mine dares not call thee from thy sacred hill. Yet there I have wandered by thy vaunted rill, yes, sighed over Delphi's long deserted shrine, where save that feeble fountain all is still, nor mote my shell awake the weary nine to grace so plain a tale. This lowly lay of mine. Part 2. Whilome in Albine's isle there dwelt a youth, who in virtue's ways did take delight, but spent his days in riot most uncouth, and vexed with mirth the drowsy ear of night. Ah me, in sooth he was a shameless wight, sore given to revel and ungodly glee. Few earthly things found favour in his sight, save concubines and carnal company, and flaunting vessels of high and low degree. So, the question here is, what does Hellas refer to? A. Greece, B. England, C. Israel, D. Paradise. Next question, which is also based on the same extract. Identify the poet. A. John Milton, B. William Blake, C. Lord Alfred Tennyson, D. Lord Byron. So, who is the poet of this extract? Next, again based on the same one, the poetic form here is A. Sonnet, B. Ballad, C. Canto, D. Ode. And our next question based on the same extract, what does Albion refer to? A. Greece, B. England, C. Israel, D. Paradise. Number 27, look at the question. Which writer said, no man is an island? A. William Congreve, B. John Donne, C. Ernest Hemingway, D. Andrew Marvell. Next one, read the following. Say what a strange motive, goddess, could compel a well-bred lord to assault a gentle belle. Oh, say what stranger cause yet unexplored could make a gentle belle reject a lord. In tasks so bold can little men engage, and in soft bosoms dwell such mighty rage. Question here, who is the poet? A. John Dryden, B. Jonathan Swift, C. Alexander Pope, D. Samuel Butler. Next, same passage, 29. What is the genre of the poem? A. Heroic epic, B. Ode, C. Elegy, D. Mock epic. Number 30. The gentle belle here refers to Which lady is being talked about in the poem? A. Matilda, B. Belinda, C. Melinda, D. Patricia. Number 31, read the following. It's a dedication. My lord, as I was lately reviewing my loose papers, amongst the rest I found this essay, the writing of which in this rude and indigested manner wherein your lordship now sees it, served as an amusement to me in the country when the violence of the last plague had driven me from the town. Seeing then our theatres shut up, I was engaged in these kinds of thought with the same delight with which men think upon their absent mistresses. I confess I find many things in this discourse which I do not now approve, my judgment being not a little altered since the writing of it. But whether I for the better or the worse I know not, neither indeed is it much material in an essay where all I have said is problematical. For the way of writing plays in verse which I have seemed to favour, I have since that time laid the practice of it aside till I have more leisure, because I find it troublesome and slow, but I am no way altered from my opinion of it, at least with any reasons which have opposed it. Identify the work. A. In defense of poesy. B. An essay of dramatic poesy. C. The function of criticism. D. A defense of poetry. Question 32. Dash was a revision of Percy Bysshe Shelley's Lan and Cynthia, an attempt to write an epic poem in the style of Edmund Spenser's poem, The Fairy Queen. For publication, Shelley reluctantly agreed to cut some overtly anti-Christian phrases. He described the work as an experiment on the temper of the public mind, effectively a test of how far his ideas could be pushed before readers became outraged and disengaged. The poem proved too symbolic and provocative, and the Quarterly Review published a hostile assessment. Identify the work. A. The Revolt of Islam. B. The Mask of Anarchy. C. Absalom and Ahithophel. D. The Necessity of Atheism. Tennyson's Lady of the Shalott is A. A lyric, B. A sonnet, C. A ballad, D. An ode. Number 34. Which poem by Alfred Tennyson is a narrative of the adventures of King Arthur? A. Ulysses, B. Idylls of the King, C. The Lotus Eaters, D. The Charge of the Light Brigade. Let us discuss the answers now. So, the passage from Iliad where Hector is shouting, the answer is D. Patroclus, death of Patroclus. Second is A. Preface to the lyrical ballads. I am going to talk about romanticism, and we will be talking about the significance of the lyrical ballads. Wordsworth and Coleridge's the lyrical ballads, and the movement is, answer to the third question is D. Romanticism. Fourth is C. Shakespeare. Who is being talked about? Which great personality? It is taken from Preface to Shakespeare by Dr. Samuel Johnson, one of the greatest lexicographers ever. Fifth is D. Antiquity, the ancient past. In this context, D. The ancient past. And sixth is D. Simile, the presence of the word as, which means comparing, likening something. So, simile. Seventh is B. Hyperion, an epic poem by P.B. Shelley. And Naiad is A. water nymph. Ninth is, who is this poem based or talking about? D. Keats. This poem is Adonis by Shelley. And who, the question number 10, who is Narcissus? Young man with great beauty, A. Narcissus. The genre of the poem is 11, that is the 11th question, B. Elegy. And the answer to the 12th question is C. Personification. Personification, remember, is a figure of speech in which a thing, an idea, or even an animal is given human attributes. So, spring is morning, moon is smiling. Okay, so these are personification, giving human attributes to what is generally considered a non-living object. The non-human, I am sorry, not non-living but non-human object. So, non-human objects through this conceit of literary device of personification, they are portrayed in such a way that we feel that we have the ability, that these objects, non-human objects, have an ability to act like human beings. But let us not consider or confuse science fiction with personification. HAL 2000 in Kubrick's A Space Odyssey is not personification, strictly speaking. 13th, C. The Mask of Anarchy, again by Shelley. And 14th is D. Coleridge took a walking tour in Cumbria, mountains of Cumbria. 15th is B. Culture and Anarchy by Matthew Arnold, the great Victorian poet. Culture and Anarchy is a major work of criticism by Matthew Arnold. It is an 1869 work. Remember, these dates may come back to you. So, 1869. In it, Arnold contrasts culture, which he defines as the study of perfection, with anarchy, the prevalent mood of England's then new democracy, which lacks standards and a sense of direction. Controversial but very relevant work. Arnold classified English society into the barbarians, okay, and the barbarians with their lofty spirit, serenity, distinguished manners, and their inaccessibility to ideas. And another classification was the Philistines, the stronghold of religious non-conformity with plenty of energy and morality, but insufficient sweetness and light. That is Arnold's work term, sweetness and light. And then populace. So, three categories of three social categories: barbarians, Philistines, and the populace, still raw and unseeing, spiritually, intellectually blind people. According to Arnold, it is in the Philistines where you find the key to culture. They were the most influential segment of society. Their strength was the nation's strength, their crudeness its crudeness. It therefore was necessary to educate and humanize the Philistines. Arnold saw in the idea of the state, that is important here, the state, what is a state, and not in any one class of society, the true organ and repository of the nation's collective best self. And the sequel to Culture and Anarchy is Friendship's Garland, which was published in 1871. Answer to 16 is A. Fra Lippo Lippi by Robert Browning, another Victorian poet. 17th is D. William Blake, the great romantic, and 18th is D. What is the meaning of ominous grey? A loyal confidant of any powerful individual. Sometimes you may find such kinds of vocabulary or terms that have come to become such an integral part of the English language. It may be of French origin, but nevertheless, literally it means grey eminence. It was the sobriquet of someone called Père Joseph, the monk who served as secretary to Cardinal Richelieu, chief minister under Louis XIII of France. If you know Alexander Dumas, if you know Voltaire, these names shouldn't come as a surprise to you, and you need to know, especially for international English literature exams. Now, this Richelieu, he was a very ambitious minister, and his ambition was for French domination of Europe, and this aligned very neatly with Père Joseph's hope to convert European Protestants to Roman Catholicism. Joseph's nickname, that is Eminence Gray, came from the color of his cloak and from the fact that Richelieu himself was known as the Eminence Rouge, the red eminence. So, Père Joseph, Father Joseph became Gray Eminence. So, the term Eminence Gray came to mean a loyal confidant of any powerful individual. Recently, in recent times, the word has alternately come to denote someone who is a respected and senior member within a field of profession. The grey in this perhaps alluding to the color of an elder's hair color. So, again Ominous Rouge and Ominous Grey, that is taken from their respective cloaks. 90s is A, the Beaumarchais, who is the writer, the barber of Civelle, the barber of Civelle. So, the Beaumarchais, answer is A. And 20B, the wedding guest, remember that is the clue, the rhyme of the ancient mariner by Coleridge, romantic poet. 21 is C, Giles is the father of man. It is taken from a poem, very short poem called My Heart Leaps Up. And 22 is C, the prelude, one of the most complex works of the romantic period. I am going to do this period with you soon. So, we will be referring to the lyrical ballads and the prelude. 23 is A, Hellas is Greece. 24 is D, is Childe Harold's Pilgrimage by Lord Byron. 25, the genre of the question is C, canto, a long subsection of an epic kind of a poem or long narrative poem, such as Dante's The Divine Comedy, or even Edmund Spenser's The Faerie Queene. Other examples of a poem written in cantos include Lord Byron's, that was his favorite genre or style of writing, Don Juan. And then of course, Ezra Pound nailed it with cantos, 20th century. Albine is question 26, B, England, and No Man is an Island is 27, B, John Donne, the great metaphysical poet. Remember, metaphysical poetry, perhaps we have alluded to it in one of our earlier classes, is a poetry written especially by John Donne and his followers in the 17th century England, later on revived in America in the 20th century. Its most conspicuous characteristics, we have already talked about imagery and conceit. So, deliberate combination of different types of emotions, the use of elaborate and far from obvious comparisons, that is conceits, and harshness of versification. They are not going to be soft, delicate, romantic. In metaphysical poetry, you find a mix of emotions and attitudes. This is something that the romantics sought to avoid. A metaphysical poet permits no jesting in a serious poem, no carnality in a spiritual poem, and no material concerns in a love poem. The metaphysical poet or poets accept the fact that pure feelings do not actually exist, and hence they are artificial, that a man may be genuinely and deeply in love and at the same time may objectively analyze his feelings and be aware of and be amused by the antics of lovers. Remember, in metaphysical poetry, the figures of speech are intellectually conceived rather than merely ornamental. The romantic love poet, on the other hand, compares himself and his lady to, let us say, doves, turtles, delicate objects, to flowers, to anything decorative, ornamental, without too much concern with the strict accuracy of his comparisons. The metaphysical poet, however, tells us that he and his lady are like a geometrical compass. Now, this is harsh simile, harsh imagery. There are two things joined by a bond that makes them one. They are often separated, but the one who remains stationary always inclines towards the traveler and the center of his motions. For more on Donne, you must read A Valediction and also Forbidden Mourning. Donne attacked all ideas of platonic or unconsummated love, not like Keats at all. And he compresses a great deal into his famous verses, whoever loves if he do not propose. The right true end of love, he is one that goes. So, that is metaphysical poetry for you, extremely important from the point of view of any exam. Question 28, answer is C. Who is the poet? Pope, Alexander Pope. The poem is, of course, The Rape of the Lock. And the genre, 29, D, it is a mock epic. The lady in question, the gentle belle, is B. Belinda. The Rape of the Lock, again a great satirical poem written in the 18th century, 1712 to be precise. Is about the fuss that high society makes over trifling matters such as breaches of decorum. In the poem, a feud of epic proportions erupts after a baron who is smitten by this beautiful girl Belinda. He steals a lock of her hair. You see, in those times it was customary for a lover to possess his lady's lock of hair as a mark of remembrance, honor, but the lady has to concede to give her lock to the admirer, and here the baron steals, and therefore there is a feud, and it is like an epic poetry now almost, and now he emulates or parodies rather all the conventions of an epic poetry that you have seen in poems like Iliad and Odyssey. Pope bases The Rape of the Lock on a real life incident. On it was they were called the Petre and the Fermor families. They had a falling out after Lord Petre snipped off one of the girls from the Fermor family, Arabella Fermor. Other themes that Pope develops in the poem include human vanity and the importance of being able to laugh at life's little silliness. The latter motif is a kind of moral to the story. Because a mock epic parodies a classical epic, it uses the same conventions or formulas as the classical epic, but usually in a harmonious way. For example, a convention of many classical epics is a sea voyage in which perils confront the hero at every turn. In The Rape of the Lock, the sea voyage is Belinda's boat trip up the Thames river. Her guardian sylph, Ariel, and she is being guarded by a benevolent spirit, Ariel. He sees black, or it sees black omens that foretell disasters for Belinda, even though the waves flow smoothly and the winds blow gently. And what are the disasters? Will she stain her dress, lose her necklace, miss a play or a masque, forget her prayers, and these are the disasters awaiting. So, it is like a parody. And so frightful are the omens that Ariel summons 50 of his companion spirits to guard Belinda, as well as the ringlets of her hair. Some of the epic conventions that Pope parodies is one is invocation of the muse that you have already seen, goddess. Now, in ancient Greece and Rome, poets had always requested the muse to fire them with creative genius. Milton does that in Paradise Lost, which is a very serious kind of an epic poem. So, poets had always requested the muse to guide them and fill them with creative genius. Genius is a very fuzzy quality, not everybody possesses that, or not everybody can possess that. So, whenever poets would start or begin long narrative poems or epics about godlike figures, they had to invoke the muse. In Greek mythology, there were 9 muses, all sisters, who were believed to inspire poets, historians, musicians, singers, astronomers, philosophers and other thinkers and artists. If one had to write a great poem or play a musical instrument with elan or develop a grand scientific or philosophical theory, he would ask for help from a muse. When a writer asked for help, he was said to be invoking the muse. The muse of epic poetry was named Calliope. In the Rape of the Lock, poet or Pope does not invoke a goddess. Instead, he invokes his friend John Carroll, who had asked Pope to write a literary work focusing on that particular event and Lady Arabella's event of snipping off lock of her hair. Now, Carroll thought that poking fun at the incident would reconcile the families by showing them how trivial the incident was. So, that was the motive. Pope also parodies division of the poem into books or cantos. The traditional epic is long, requiring several days of reading. For example, Dante's Divine Comedy contains 34 cantos. When printed, the work consists of a work about 2 inches thick. Pope presents only 5 cantos containing a total of fewer than 600 lines, but he is miniaturing it. Okay? And by this device, he demonstrates the smallness of the behavior exhibited by the main characters of the poem. There is another characteristic, a convention, description of soldiers preparing for battle. So, in the Iliad, you remember, and we are going to do some detailed reading of the Iliad and Odyssey soon in our subsequent classes. Homer describes in great detail the armor and weaponry of the great Achilles and the battlefield trappings of other heroes. In the Rape of the Lock, Pope describes Belinda preparing herself with all kinds of ornaments, puffs, powders, patches, and famously Pope says, "Now awful beauty puts on all its arms." A great poem, a satirical poem nevertheless, but is still a very great poem, an excellent example of the mock heroic conventions, a perennial favorite of all the examiners for English for competitive purposes. 31 is B, is taken from an essay of dramatic poesy by John Dryden, and 32 is A, Shelley's The Revolt of Islam. Number 33 is C, The Lady of the Shalott is a ballad by Tennyson, and 34 B, King Arthur's Adventures, Idylls of the King by Tennyson.